Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 11th of May 2024. I'm sorry if some of you are watching the Eurovision Song Contest right now in Europe. If you've switched me on and I've replaced that, I do apologise. I'm actually watching it, and you know what? Like, say what you like about it. I quite like it because it's very positive and it gives a great sense of European unity. And I'm watching that on one screen, and I've just watched Ukraine's song, and it was phenomenal. I really, really liked it. I need to go back and check out what the lyrics are saying. I thought it was really arresting and a great song. And at the same time, I was watching the protests on my other screen in Georgia, where they're walking down the streets, and I've got some guy dancing, doing some dances in the middle of these protesters walking with EU flags and Georgian flags, and then pictures of Tbilisi and its biggest ever demonstrations there. It looks absolutely phenomenal. And on the one hand, you have this aspiration towards the West, towards liberty, and towards liberalism and Europe and the EU. And on the other hand, you've got a celebration of life, really, in the Eurovision Song Contest, which you can say is twee and camp and whatever. But I don't know. I'd much rather a world where we can have that and turn it off if you don't want to watch it, or have that and celebrate in that, rather than a world where you're just constrained and don't have any of this. And that's the world that kind of Russia want of and for the rest of us. Yeah, so I don't know. Just interesting getting a sense of that in just watching some TV. Anyway, I probably think about things too much. Right, let's go to the Frontline. Thanks to JR who's done the Frontline update on the mapping. Really appreciate that. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out this key on the screen at the moment. Pause the video. Otherwise, we're going to go to Kharkiv Oblast first. Now, a new feature on the map is the grey zone that JR has put in, and this should be available every day. It is another blue line, and it's Andrew Perpetua's grey line. And I can turn it off if there are too many lines, and I'll probably have it off more than I have it on, but I think it's very useful for up in Kharkiv at the moment. So what this means is that Andrew Perpetua assesses that for his Russian control zone, you have the furthest, in this case, furthest to the north line here. That's what he assesses the Russians control. Then you've got a grey zone here, and then he assesses that the Ukrainians are in control of all the land to the south of this second blue line, which is interesting here because that means that Surat Maps has a claim that the Russians control an area of land that Andrew Perpetua claims that the Ukrainians control, and so that is really a very contradictory state of affairs there between the mappers. Right. So knowing that, we can then go and look at what's going on in the two areas. I have heard that there's another area around here, or seen some people saying that the Russians might be attacking somewhere else here, but we can see two main areas where the Ukrainians have been pushed back, but I don't think they're really in there. I've talked to you about how it's very difficult to set any meaningful fortifications up in the area close to the border, and so therefore the Russians will find it relatively easy to take this land, but they are, I think, getting hit by artillery, drones and whatnot, and losing troops and equipment. I've seen quite a number of it, but this suggests that the grey zone is large. The Russians have taken control of a number, or at least are contesting a number of these villages from Streletsha over in the west, right over to over here at Pletenivka, and a number of other villages in between. So that is what the situation is up there with on the map. We have Deep State Map saying that the enemy's offensive continues near Gatishche, Lukyansky and Hibyoke, and that we've got grey zone increase according to Andrew Perpetua. So that's that. We'll look at some of the other sources. Kyiv Independent says that the Kharkiv governor says heavy fighting is ongoing, but there's no threat of ground invasion of the city. Ole Sinyabov said that the situation was fully controlled. Sinyabov claimed fighting was ongoing in 4 of the 5 villages claimed by Moscow: Streletsha, Pilna, Borisivka and Oritseve. So still fighting in those villages, and grey zone is probably the best interpretation of that. I mean, it is like a war zone there at the moment. More than 20 carbs, so the guided glide bombs from the Russians, were issued on Vovchansk and surrounding settlements, according to the Kharkiv regional military administration. So Vovchansk is here, and this is a large settlement, right? This is a pretty large town. It's spread quite a bit, and larger than a lot of the other places around in terms of population, and that is getting some attention by quite a lot of carbs there. A 50-year-old, 48-year-old civilian were killed, 2 more men were wounded. Communities under increased enemy shelling. Russians are hitting with multiple launch rocket system artillery and drones. So it's not looking good there for the Ukrainians who are holding on to life in Vovchansk. The information from Kharkiv is very variable, says Andrew Perpetua. I have a number of sources I trust very much, saying very contradictory things. And honestly, I don't think any of them are wrong. I think the situation is much more complex than can be summed up in a tweet. He says, summing up in a tweet. No, that's interesting to know that it is, there are varying messages coming out from this neck of the woods. That's that third area there I was talking about, and actually arguably a fourth area as well. So Surat Map's saying that the Russians may be pushing both around here by Zelene and also over here too. We'll have a look, see what Surat Map says of late. So the situation here is that 4 spearheads were opened by the Russian army to penetrate Kharkiv Oblast. Streletsya, Polnya and Borisivka were taken by Russian forces. Clashes with the Ukrainian army continue around where were we? Krasna and the northern outskirts of Hliboke. And then in this area there, Russian troops entered in Zelene. Clashes continue there. And then in this third area, during the last few hours, Russians crossed the border in the direction of Staritsya. And in this fourth area, which is on the way to Vovchansk, the localities of Ohitsve and Pletanivka were taken by Russians. Currently, an operation to capture Vovchansk is taking place from 3 axes. From the northwest, there is fighting in Hatishchi. From the north, the troops reach the airfield and meat processing plant, and from the east, the troops managed to seize the heights overlooking the Vovcha Valley and entered a large part of Tika there. So this is to say that over in this area, the Russians may have taken some higher ground in this area on the way to Vovchansk from the east. I don't think it's anywhere further east from there though. But anyway, it's all going to be fairly chaotic around there. There's going to be lots of information flying around. You can see various pieces of video evidence to suggest that the Ukrainians have done a fairly good job of at least repelling some of the equipment. I've seen a number of buildings, troops and mechanized equipment being taken out by the Ukrainians in that neck of the woods, or in those areas. That's going to be ongoing. All the same analysis that I gave previously is still going to be relevant. I haven't changed my mind. I'm not sure that this is going to be hugely worthwhile, but then I guess there could be quite a bit of a PR element. And I say that because I don't really pay attention to like radio news and whatnot, but I had to drive out in the car a few times today. And this was one of the main things on the news, which is that, they're evacuating lots of people from Vovchansk and the Russians are attacking from the north into Kharkiv. And actually, this is playing out quite a bit in the media and given a lot more seriousness, I think. And therefore, you can see that there is a PR advantage to be gained from the Russians attacking there. So anyway, we come on to the northeastern area, and you can see that really there's not a lot of activity across the rest of the front line, which I think, not a lot of movement on the map in terms of change of control, and that's very different from not a lot of activity. There could be a lot of activity in all these places, just not going anywhere fast. But we have Deep State Map saying that the Ukrainians have been pushed back a little bit to the east of Kolomyachivka, vaguely near Stelmakivka, or quite near Stelmakivka, which we'd heard about recently, and that is challenging for the Ukrainians if that's the case, because that's another area along this front line where there's activity. So we've seen Kislivka, we've seen south of Tabaivka, Novoselivska, and then of course Terny and Torska. So yeah, it's there's quite a lot going on in a number of different places, even if there isn't huge amounts of territorial change. Seversk, no changes there. Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, it doesn't look like there's any change at the moment. However, actually, Surrey Maps has made a recent change so that we might see JR, if the mapping's done tomorrow, we might see that this area there is now under Russian control, as according to Surrey Maps, and a little bit up there, just north of the Canal Micro District, which is just around there. It's a bit of a gain for the Russians in that area. Surrey Maps says about this that the Russians entered again into the Canal Micro District from the adjacent forest. In addition, troops secured the last stretch of the road from Ivanivska to the Water Canal. And this is, if you remember the other day, there were claims that the Ukrainians had, or the Russians had got to this culvert here and to what they were calling the pipes, the kind of tunnels under the land here, and that this was a bit of a worry because they were close to being able to cross the canal, while it could be that the Russians have taken more land up to that point, all the way along the T0504 road up into that bridge, which is surely not in bridge-worthy shape at the moment, I would imagine. Right, so we're going to come out from Chasiv Yar and go down to Avdiivka. As you may have seen in the reporting from Ukraine video this morning, the Ukrainians are apparently counter-attacking south of Ocheritina, and they are pushing the Russians back with the help of a number of newly procured Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. So that is really good news there. I'm just going to turn off the grey zone at the moment just to simplify it a little bit. But yeah, so that is potentially really good news. The Ukrainians might have incurred quite a few costs on the Russians there. They might well have taken some fairly severe personnel and mechanized equipment losses for that area. Then when we come down, Deep State Map has some gains for the Russians in the Pervomaisky area, just pushing slightly further on into Netalove. Actually, Surrey Maps has some, I think, additions that were on top of what JR had done earlier. So I should have done this mapping update earlier, but I just couldn't get to it. But the Surrey Maps says that in this area, the Russian army has advanced south of Netalove, taking control over Chkalova poultry plant. So that would be in line with what Deep State Maps has there, exactly that area. So that would be an agreement between those two mappers. And then we can see Deep State Map saying that the Russians are closing this pocket just north of Novelska, between Pervomaisky and Novelska. And here we can see, oh no, that's going further down to the south actually. So that is, again, a bit of a challenge for the Ukrainians there. And Deep State also agreeing that the Russians have pushed further on in the middle of Krasnohorivka, which is nothing new. It's just an agreement with the other mappers, so that might not be any activity in the last 24 hours particularly. I mean, it will be active there, but it's not that the Russians have made those gains in the last 24 hours because the other two mappers had already had that. And then we have at Herivka some further gains since the mapping was done, as according to Surat Maps, during the last week. So it's not necessarily the last 24 hours, but the last week the Russians have entered again into the areas that were previously abandoned in Herivka, the schools area, and the Ukrainian army has retreated to the trench system located at the center of the town. So yeah, there must be trenches in the town or village of Herivka, and Russians have made some gains there potentially. But that's it for the whole front line, really. Not too much else to say. I'm not popping into the Institute for the Study War just because time is of the essence. And of course, I want to check out the Eurovision Song Contest and see if the 38 times I've voted for Ukraine will have made any difference to the public vote in the UK. I haven't voted that many times, don't worry. It's about 35, I think. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Oh, and if you do get a chance to vote for Ukraine, just go for it.